I'm Helen Van Wyk, and welcome to my studio. Yes, I'm talking today about efficiency. Efficiency really needs planning. You ever notice how someone seems to do something so well when it's being done, but that doesn't mean that the person hadn't thought out the whole project ahead of time. So let me show you how I plan out doing eyes. Let's look at these eyes. This is Jessie, and this is Benita. Such a sweet, wonderful woman. Look at the eye sockets of Jessie. They're kind of deep. And look at Benita's. They're wide apart and so open and endorsing. So I've sketched on this board, if you can see, I've sketched in the basic shape of Jessie's sockets, which is the first thing you should aim for in an efficient way to paint one of the most difficult or complicated features of the face. So with a gray, I usually start out by indicating the overall eye socket, going back to what her skeleton looks like. And then the eye socket is against the nose. Yes, there's lots of things within that eye area that is not dark, but it really is so much better to start the eye in a dark tone to begin with. Why? Well, let me show you why. You always have to ask me why, or I leave you in the dark. The forehead, if we look at the side view of a face, here is the forehead coming, it's a plane where the light strikes. Then the eyes are here. And then the nose comes out. So light can hit the forehead, light can hit the nose, but the light can't hit on these planes here and here. And then, of course, the mouth is, again, another example of light and dark. And that's why it's better to start the eyes as an overall shape of dark. The underplane of Jessie's nose is also dark. And of course it casts a shadow. The longer you make that cast shadow, the more her nose sticks out. Now, let me show you the change or the difference of the mass tone of the eyes of Benita. Her eyebrows are flatter. The eyes, then, I always like to do this shape and this shape together. I never do that whole shape and then this whole shape. Doing it this way and this way and this way and this way helps you keep them in perspective and helps you make them a matching pair. And then just wash in. This is the beginning stage of everybody's eyes. Just wash in the overall shape of the socket. And that takes in from the eyebrow to the last bag. Let me show you the difference between these two. You'll see them better if I take out this mess over here. Of course, these shapes are blended into the rest of your tones. So there's two types of sockets, and that is the beginning of the eye likeness. Let's take another factor of eyes, and that is that inside this socket there's a ball, and in that ball there's an iris, and the iris is glass-like, just like this. So if we know how to paint a glass ball, we'll be able to paint the iris of eyes. So let me do this this ball to represent a blue iris. So we don't see the whole iris. The lid always covers half of it, but I'm going to, just because it's going to be fun to do this for you, I'm going to do the whole iris and fill in its general overall tone. Now there's something about reflective types of textures. Reflective, they're shiny, and that's what makes them have an obvious and very obvious highlight. If the light is coming from the right, the highlight would be then here. Now, because the eye is glass-like, that color, or the light striking here, goes in and bounces out there, or shows up a lot right there. And I think that just by doing that, you can almost see that this is starting to look a little bit more transparent. It's going to look extremely, much more transparent if I darken it over here, on the side where the light comes from. Because it's right at this point that the light is not affecting the glass at all. It only can fill in the light over this way. And so, that's the kind of knowledge that will help you paint the iris of an eye. So let me put that understanding into practice here. Here is the iris. Now that's that lower part. And it sits in a non-reflective ball. But it too has its way of getting light and dark. This gets the darkest on the light side, but a non-reflective object gets a shadow on the dark side. So we only see the real white of the eye over here. So this looks a little bit more like a round ball and held in to the basic eye socket with a lid. And held in on the bottom with a lid. Now the eyelid casts a shadow over the iris and the ball. There's always a little membrane there. This particular dark that's right under this thickness of the lower lid is a legitimate tone. Legitimate in that, I mean, you should paint that in. It's the next one and the next one that you shouldn't put in. Couldn't resist that. Because it's this particular one is structural. That's the one that makes it look as though. And now, inside the iris, we have the pupil. And we want to make this blue part look glass-like. I think I have to make a few little indications of these are examples, demonstrations, diagrams to point out how an understanding can help your aim. Yeah, that's better. So now we have, here I put a highlight. That highlight usually hits right at the corner between the pupil and the iris, right about there. And then the color of the eye, meaning this, is diagonally across from it in line with the light. Now, because an eye dilates, it's best to paint that in strokes to be like. So that's where you really do put the color of the eye. Some people have such dark eyes you can't even see that, but it's a good thing to put something about it in to help that look like the texture of glass. So you add your knowledge to what you see to make your picture extremely convincing. And now this is where the eye gets darker. That represents this. So there's the evil eye. It's all well and good to understand the elements of an eye, the socket and the ball in the socket, but how do you ease this information into actually painting an eye? You see, I did this, and this is important, the socket shape, and this is important to know, but this is not in context to the actual painting of a person. And so I would like to show you how I use that understanding in painting these eyes. I painted her eyes out just for you so that you could see the progression, the efficient progression of application to include all the elements that her eyes are. So you can see that I started out, I painted them out by putting in the shape of her sockets. And I do that with a color that is rather neutral. Not the color of flesh and not the color of shadow, but gray, just a gray. Sometimes a little bit warmer than a warm gray. How do you make a warm gray? Black, white, and a warm color. And then, before I start working on the eye itself, I have to take my colors of the surrounding areas and move them up to their shapes. And then start to work into the eye itself. So now I have the socket in a general tone. Now I'm going to find where the light hits. Well, let's always look at things from the top down. The light is coming, in this case, from the left, and this fullness catches light, the shape of which, of course, is extraordinarily important. Now, then there's a corresponding shape over here but it's a little different than this because the eyes are at different perspective, so we just see maybe a little bit of light there. Each addition of shape into this socket adds to the likeness. So it's up to you to try to be accurate about the shapes. Now, load your brush at the end. Always load the brush at the end, because that's the part that does all the dirty work, or the good work. Now, the light can hit the thickness of the lid. And how the lid meets the side plane of the nose, but not there, because that's in cast shadow from the nose. Then, as you look, you see that the light can strike the eye on this side and the eyeball on this side, but not on the other side, because it's a ball, and that's the shadow side. And then the eye is held in with the lower lid, and this is a very important tone value shape right there. If you move that way up, she gets mean looking. Move it way down, she looks kind of, starry-eyed and innocent. And I told you about that legitimate dark shape under that lid. That's what holds the eye in. Be kind about all the other ones, the ones that start to drip and drip down from the eye. But we always see this a little lighter. Why? Because it's a highlight area, it's a concave plane. Now that's the lights that I see in the eyes. And now, where are the darker darks? We're just letting this basic tone act as the general overall dark now. So now the darker darks are shadows, violet or green, a gray, cool color. I took black, white, and alizarin crimson. Let's see how this looks. Yes, that seems to enjoy the colors it's near, and this is the shadow from the eyelid on the eyeball. And then there's a shadow here in that crease. Many people disconnect the iris from that shadow. It should be done, it should be all together one tone to begin with. It helps you. Don't put the color of the eye in now, the iris. That's just, what if you put that color in and your aim was kind of bad? It's better to just put it in a darker tone and push the color into it. Now for the pupil. Black. Yes, I use black, but I never use it alone. I take black and I'm going to put her pupil in black and blue. Why? Why black and blue? Because her eyes are going to be brown, and that black would be a bluish color, complementary to the brownness or orangeness of her eyes. And so I put that in. My brush goes back to my palette a lot and very quickly because I always have to be working with a loaded brush. Constantly have to correct. Let me go back to this lower lid. Better. Don't ever make the white of the eye pure white. Put a little bit of more white into your flesh color. See, I have the flesh color here. I've just added white into it. So it has some life. We always see a nice highlight or lighter tone here too. So now I can put that highlight in. You can't put the highlight in until you have done all that I've already done. And then remember on the blue ball, the light made a highlight and then bounced out across from it. Now she has brown eyes, so white, orange, burnt sienna maybe. And this is where you actually see the color of the eye and the glass-like quality of the eye. I try, when I give these lessons to you, to not confuse you with correction, but it is very tempting. Because when I do the eyes, I never do the eyes without seeing those same tone values on the rest of the face. To make these tone values enjoy this entire presentation, because that's what painting is. It's a presentation of a likeness, not really a likeness. So let me step back a minute. Now, an efficient way of looking is to work from the top down, because you don't miss anything that way. So let's see how that top-down way of looking gives you a chance to put in every element of the eye, starting with the brow. After you've put the socket in, of course, is to then accentuate the eyebrow, because that's one of the things you have to take into consideration. And then the shape that's right under the eyebrow. And by working from the top down, the top of the brush corrects the bottom of the shape that you last did. And then the bottom of that shape is corrected with the next shape you put in. And then that is corrected with the next one. Just watching the top of the brush. Love to work this way. And then the iris. And then that's corrected with the lower lid. You've seen me, many of you who have watched my program before, see that I always do this. I always work from the top down. Don't think that you have to be different with everything that you paint. A different technique, one reliable technique for everything. I think that the pianist uses the same fingering for each scale that he has to do. And so then darker to put this in. Now, E in painting stands for effort. Sometimes it stands for excellent, if you're lucky. Next time we meet, I'm going to tell you all about what comes after E. F, yes, one of my favorite subjects. Or I'll teach you how to make soup. Hello, I'm Helen Van Wyk, and welcome to my studio.